I did not flinch. I did not make a sound. I just stood in the hallway outside the conference room, my phone face up in my palm, reading the message for the third time. The carpet beneath my heels was the same navy blue it had always been. The fluorescent light above me hummed the same low hum it hummed every single morning. Nothing in that building had changed, except everything had. My brother-in-law had just sent a company-wide email copied to the board, copied to HR, copied to every regional director from Houston to Boston, announcing that the promotion I had spent 4 years building toward had been given to someone else. Not just someone else. Him. And at the bottom of that email, in a postscript so casual it made my stomach turn, he had written, "We all knew this day was coming. Some people just aren't built for the next level." He did not name me. He did not have to. My husband read the message over my shoulder. He didn't say anything at first. He just placed one hand on the small of my back and looked at the screen for a long, quiet moment. Then he smiled. I didn't understand that smile then. I would, soon enough. My name is Claire, and I have worked at Hargrove Capital Management for 6 years. I started as a junior analyst straight out of graduate school, 26 years old, with a second-hand blazer and a student loan payment that made me slightly nauseous every first of the month. I was not handed anything. I tracked market trends until my eyes burned. I built client portfolios from scratch. I stayed late when everyone else went home. Not because I was told to, but because I genuinely believed the work mattered. By the time I was 30, I managed a book of business worth more than $40 million. My client retention rate was the highest in the Southeast region. My direct supervisor, a quiet, measured man named Director Lawson, had told me twice in performance reviews that I was being groomed for the regional director position opening up in the spring. I believed him. I had earned the right to believe him. My sister married Marcus 3 years ago. I stood at her wedding and toasted to their happiness and meant every word of it. My sister has always been the louder one, bigger laugh, bigger dreams, bigger reaction to everything. When she called me on a Tuesday afternoon to tell me Marcus had just been hired at Hargrove in the acquisitions department, I said, "That's wonderful." And I meant that too. What I did not anticipate was what would happen once Marcus learned what I was being considered for. He was charming about it at first. Family dinners where he would ask me questions about the regional director role with what seemed like genuine curiosity. Questions about the compensation structure, the client accounts attached to the position, the reporting hierarchy, who on the board had the most influence. I answered most of them. He was my brother-in-law. We were family. I found out later, from my assistant Priya, that Marcus had been meeting privately with 2 board members every Thursday morning for the past 5 months. Breakfast meetings. Off-site. Nothing on the official calendar. By the time I learned that, the email had already gone out. I walked back to my office and closed the door. Priya looked up from her desk as I passed, and her expression told me she had already seen it. She started to say something. I shook my head once, gently, and she nodded and turned back to her screen. I sat down. I opened my laptop. I had 14 unread emails in the last 11 minutes, most of them from colleagues who didn't know what to say, and were saying something anyway. I closed the inbox. My husband called. I let it go to voicemail, then thought better of it and called him back. "I saw," he said before I could speak. He used the board presentation I gave in December, I told him. The growth model, the regional expansion proposal. I built that over 8 months. It's in the appendix of his pitch deck. Priya sent me a screenshot. There was a pause on the line. "I know," my husband said. "You know, Claire?" His voice was calm in a way I wasn't ready for. "Do you remember the name of the compliance attorney I had lunch with last month?" I thought for a moment. "Hartwell? The one from the firm that represents 3 of Hargrove's largest institutional investors," he said. "Yes. We had a very interesting conversation." I didn't say anything. "Go home," he said. "I'll be there at 6. I want to explain something about my husband. We met at a conference in Atlanta 4 years ago. He was sitting across from me at a panel on emerging market risk, and when the moderator asked a question that everyone else fumbled, he gave the clearest, most precise answer I had ever heard in a professional setting. Afterward, I told him so. He laughed and said most people found him boring at parties. He is not boring. He is the kind of quiet that other people mistake for ordinary, right up until the moment they don't. He works in institutional advisory. His clients are not individuals. His clients are funds. The kind of funds that hold significant ownership stakes in mid-size financial firms. Firms like, for example, Hargrove Capital Management. I did not know, when Marcus was running his Thursday breakfast campaign, that two of those board members had separately reached out to my husband's firm 3 weeks prior with questions about fiduciary exposure, routine inquiries, they called them. My husband had answered them thoroughly. He had also, in the course of those conversations, mentioned that he had recently reviewed a particularly impressive regional expansion proposal prepared by a senior analyst whose work he admired greatly. He did not mention that the analyst was his wife. He didn't need to. The board members had access to internal documents. They could read a name at the top of a presentation. I left the office at 4:30, which I never do. I drove home with the radio off. I changed out of my blazer. I stood in the kitchen and drank a glass of water and looked out the window at the backyard and tried to locate the feeling I was supposed to be having. Anger felt too simple. Humiliation was closer, but even that wasn't quite right. What I felt, mostly, was tired. The specific tired that comes not from working hard but from realizing you have been working hard inside a system that was being quietly rearranged around you. My husband came home at 6:02. He set his bag down, loosened his tie, and sat across from me at the kitchen table. "Tell me what you want to do," he said. "I want to keep my job," I said. "I want the promotion I earned. And I want Marcus to answer for what he did." He nodded slowly. "Okay. Okay. The board called an emergency governance meeting this afternoon," he said. After the email went out, two of the institutional investors flagged a conflict of interest concern through their advisory channel, which happens to be my firm. I stared at him. "The concern," he continued, "relates to an internal candidate being passed over in favor of a candidate whose promotion pitch contained proprietary research and modeling that appears to have originated with someone else. Someone whose client book, by the way, represents roughly 60% of the regional revenue base." "Marcus didn't know that," I said. "Marcus didn't do his homework," my husband said. "Which is interesting for someone who wanted to run a region." That night I did not sleep well. Not because I was afraid. I think, honestly, because I knew what was coming, and something in my body hadn't caught up to the part of my brain that had already processed it. The next morning I was in the office at 7:15. Priya was already at her desk. She handed me a coffee without speaking. I sat down, opened my laptop, and waited. At 8:40, Marcus appeared in my doorway. He was wearing the charcoal suit he always wore when he wanted to project authority. He had his hands in his pockets. He looked at me with the expression of someone who had rehearsed being gracious in victory. "Morning, Claire," he said. "No hard feelings, right? This is just business." I looked at him for a moment. "Good morning," I said. He waited, clearly expecting more. I turned back to my screen. At 9:15, he was called into the office of the Chief Compliance Officer. I know this because Priya has a direct line of sight to that hallway, and she sent me a single text that said, "He just went in." At 9:53, Director Lawson appeared in my doorway. He asked if I had a few minutes. I said yes. We walked to the small conference room at the end of the hall, the one with the frosted glass, and he closed the door and sat down across from me and clasped his hands on the table. "I want to apologize," he said. I said nothing. There was pressure applied to this process that I should have pushed back on harder. I didn't, and that was a failure of judgment on my part, and I'm telling you that directly. "What's happening right now?" I asked. "The board has placed the regional director appointment on hold pending a governance review," he said. "The compliance team is reviewing the pitch deck Marcus submitted. There are questions about the sourcing of the market analysis and the expansion model." "My market analysis," I said. "My expansion model." He nodded. He had the grace to hold my gaze. "The two institutional investors who raised the concern," he said carefully, "have requested that the selection process be reopened with an independent evaluation of all candidates." "And Marcus?" Marcus has been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of the review. I looked out the frosted window. You could see the shapes of people moving in the hallway, blurred and soft, going about their morning. What happens to me? I said. That, Director Lawson said, depends on what you want. Here is what happened to my sister. She called me at noon, from her car, speaking in the fast, pressurized voice she uses when she is both furious and frightened. She told me I had gone behind her husband's back. She told me I had always been jealous of them. She told me that if Marcus lost his job because of me, our relationship was over. I let her talk. When she was done, I said, he submitted my research under his name, and he called me unfit for the position in a company-wide email. She hung up. My mother called an hour later. She had heard from my sister. She told me family should protect family, and that whatever happened at work should have stayed at work. She was upset. I understood why. She had always found it easier to ask the more accommodating of her daughters to absorb conflict so that the louder one wouldn't have to. Mom, I said. He plagiarized 4 years of my work and used it to take a position that was supposed to be mine. You don't know that it was supposed to be yours, she said. I took a long breath. I do know that, I said. And so do you. She didn't answer that. We ended the call politely, the way you end calls, when there is nothing left to say that won't make things worse. My phone kept lighting up with messages from people at the office, most of them careful and hedged, a few of them genuinely kind. Priya brought me a sandwich at 1:30 and sat across from me for a few minutes without speaking, which was exactly the right thing to do. At 3:47, I had 41 missed calls. Not from family, not from colleagues, from Marcus. I did not answer a single one. At 4:15, the chief compliance officer sent a calendar invitation to me, Director Lawson, the head of HR, and 2 board members for a meeting the following morning. The subject line read, Regional Director Selection Process Review. My husband picked me up from the office. We drove home in the low afternoon light, the city sliding past the windows, and I told him everything that had happened, and he listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I love most about him. When I finished, he said, How are you feeling? I thought about it honestly. Like I've been holding something very heavy for a very long time, I said, and I just put it down. He reached over and took my hand. The governance review took 9 days. I submitted a documented record of the expansion proposal version histories, internal emails, timestamped drafts going back to the previous April. The compliance team compared it line by line with what Marcus had submitted. The conclusion was not ambiguous. Marcus resigned before they could finish the report. He sent a brief statement through his attorney. It did not include the word sorry. My sister did not call me during those 9 days. Neither did my mother. On the 10th day, I was offered the regional director position. Director Lawson delivered the news in person. The offer included the full compensation package, the expanded client portfolio, and a formal acknowledgement in the board minutes that the original selection process had been compromised. I accepted. I sent my sister a text that evening. Not to gloat, not to reopen anything. Just 5 words. I hope you're doing okay. She read it. She didn't reply. My mother called 3 weeks later. The call was short and careful. She asked how the new role was going. I told her it was going well. She said she was proud of me, in a voice that carried something complicated underneath it, something that was maybe the beginning of understanding what she had asked me to absorb over the years without saying she was asking. I said thank you. I meant it. There is a particular kind of betrayal that arrives wrapped in the language of family. It uses your loyalty as a tool. It assumes that your desire to keep the peace will override your willingness to protect yourself. For a long time, I think that assumption was correct. I kept my head down. I worked harder. I told myself that results were their own argument, that the work would eventually speak clearly enough that no one could talk over it. What I understand now is that the work does speak, but you have to be willing to let it. My office is on the 14th floor now. It faces east. In the morning, when I come in at 7:15, the light comes through the glass at a long angle, and the whole room fills up with it. Priya is already at her desk, 2 doors down, and she brings me a coffee without being asked. And I sit down and open my laptop, and I look at the nameplate beside my door that reads Claire Whitfield, regional director, and I feel something I didn't feel for a long time. I feel like I am exactly where I am supposed to be. I got there honestly. Nobody handed it to me. Nobody protected me from the people who tried to take it. I just stopped making it easy for them. And somewhere across the city, in whatever quiet he has retreated to, I hope Marcus thinks about that postscript. I hope he thinks about the words he chose. Some people just aren't built for the next level. I think about them too, sometimes. Then I go back to work.